Chapter 4068, Bones in Hand. As soon as Yun Chujio finished her sentence, the drifters anxiously moved closer to Yun Chujio. Did she mean that she wanted something? Yun Chujio sighed. Forget it. That thing is too difficult to obtain. Just pretend that I didn't say anything. Give it up. A certain person said that this little scoundrel was really mean. The more she said that, the more curious the drifters would be. Sure enough, the drifters gathered together and jumped around. They were obviously so anxious that they were about to hit the wall. Until they were so anxious that they didn't want anything else, Yun Chujio then said, "What I want is a small piece of bone buried under the giant sword. However, I don't think this thing is easy to find. Moreover, it's under the giant sword. If you guys are in trouble." Before Yun Chujio could finish her words, the drifters could not wait to float away. Yun Chujio confirmed that the drifters had all flown away. Then she said to Di Baiming, "Prince Charming, how is it? I told you that I would definitely think of a way to deal with those drifters. This is called killing two birds with one stone. Since I kidnapped these drifters and obtained the bones effortlessly, I am really too smart." Ha! Although Di Baiming really wanted to praise Yun Chujio, he felt that it was better to forget about it. He did not need to praise this fellow as he had already praised himself like a flower. If he continued to praise her, she would float to the sky. Yun Chujio bragged for a while. When she saw that Di Baiming did not say anything, she could not help but feel a little disappointed. She poked the head of the little silver snake with her claws. "Little baby, why aren't you saying anything? Do you think you have such good taste? Are you loving me more and more?" Because there was a glimmer of hope in this matter, this fellow had the mood to tease a certain lord. Of course, the most important point was that this fellow knew that Di Baiming wouldn't be able to transform for a while, so he had nothing to fear. Di Baiming had obviously thought of this as well. He was too lazy to resist, because countless blood and tears had taught him that it was useless to resist at this time. He did not continue Yun Chujio's words. Instead, he asked, "In a while, if those drifters really bring the bones over, do you really want to make a puppet disc? There are already 5 puppet discs. Can your divine sense still separate them?" Yun Chujio revealed a sinister smile. "Of course not. Don't worry, I have a good way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone." Di Baiming saw the sinister smile on Yun Chujio's face and could not help but light a candle for those drifters. The outcome of those drifters torturing the little rascals was as miserable as it was. No, it was probably 10,000 times more miserable. However, after waiting for a long time, those drifters did not return. Yun Chujio could not help but feel anxious. Di Baiming comforted her. "Don't worry. It's probably because the sky is still dark. After all, they want to hide from people. It's impossible for them to brazenly take out the bones." Yun Chujio thought about it and agreed, so she temporarily put this matter aside and began to calm down and focus on comprehending the sword intent. In the end, this fellow was still a little unwilling. Others had already comprehended the sword intent, so why couldn't she comprehend it? Seeing this, Di Baiming didn't say anything else, but helped her to be on guard. As night fell, Yun Chujio became anxious again, so she couldn't continue comprehending, so this fellow gave up. She flirted with a certain someone and finally saw the drifters return. The drifters threw Yun Chujio a thumb-sized bone. Yun Chujio took it and looked at it. It was almost the same as the one she had seen in the fallen god abyss. Chapter 4069. The drifters who got played. Yun Chujio asked Di Baiming to confirm it again. Then she asked Di Baiming to put away the bones. Then she looked at the drifters with a smile. "Little babies, you are so capable. I will make the puppet plates now. I will release the sword pool drifters. You guys can play for a while." Yun Chujio took out the 3 puppet plates and released the sword pool drifters as well. When the 2 drifters saw each other, they immediately jumped around happily and did not disturb Yun Chujio from making the puppet discs. 2 hours later, Yun Chujio made a few puppet discs in a decent manner, but she did not inject her spiritual sense into them. She sighed faintly and said, "Little babies, perhaps I've been too tired playing with you recently. I can't separate my spiritual sense from you. I'm really sorry." Those native drifters were instantly enraged. What? Wasn't this playing with them? before the drifters could make a move. Yun Chujio continued, although I'm really sorry to you, this is all for another time. The crux of the problem now is how to bring you to my side. I really can't bear to part with you. Those native drifters were fuming. What was the use of saying such nonsense? Yun Chujio blinked her eyes. Actually, it's not that there's no other way. Aren't there 3 ready-made puppet discs here? Since you're all drifters, then there shouldn't be any distinction between you and me. Just squeeze in. Hearing Yun Chujio's words, the sword pool drifters immediately guarded the 3 puppet discs vigilantly. What a joke. It was fine to play together, but to snatch their toys? No way. There were no windows. Yun Chujio pretended to persuade them, sword pool drifters, don't be so stingy. As the saying goes, all the drifters in the world are family. You are all drifters, just squeeze together. How could the sword pool drifters listen to her? They immediately guarded the puppet discs even tighter. Yun Chujio spread her hands helplessly. Since you won't give in to each other, let's have a competition. Whoever wins, the puppet discs will belong to them. The sword pool drifter was about to explode in anger. These puppet discs were originally theirs. Why should they give it to these indigenous drifters? Those indigenous drifters were also extremely angry. The little girl had already agreed to let them enter the puppet disc, so why didn't these sword pool drifters agree? Therefore, the 2 groups of drifters pinched each other and kept rolling in the air. Hei Shinjio narrowed her eyes as she watched, her heart filled with joy. This was called sowing discord. This was called sowing discord. This was called killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Let's fight, let's fight. If we kill one, we lose one. It would be best if we all die. Unfortunately, these drifters did not disappear so easily. After fighting for 2 hours, there was still no winner between the 2 sides. Yun Chujio felt that it was not a good idea to continue like this. Moreover, if someone came, it would not end well, hence, she said hypocritically, all right. We are originally from the same root. Why are you in such a rush? You are all drifters, so don't kill each other. A certain respected person said, this is all your fault, all right? Now, she was trying to act nice. However, she had to admit that she had used this tactic to sow discord. This way, even if she returned to the nameless sword sect, the little rascal could still let the 2 groups of drifters pin each other down. Those drifters were probably tired from fighting. After hearing Yun Chujio's words, they stopped fighting. Yun Chujio said with a smile, how about this? Harmony is the most important thing in everything. Aren't there 3 puppet discs here? The drifters from the sword pool came first, so they were given 2 puppet discs. You indigenous drifters can squeeze in the other puppet disc first. When I regain my spiritual sense, it'll help you make a few puppet discs. Chapter 4070 Destruction of the Giant Sword. Although the drifter from the sword pool and the native drifter were very unwilling, it was obvious that they had no other choice. They could only follow Yun Chujio's instructions and enter the puppet disc. Actually, even if they were all squeezed into the same puppet disc, it wasn't impossible. However, these drifters liked the trace of Yun Chujio's divine sense in the puppet disc, so they naturally weren't willing to share more with the drifters. When Yun Chujio saw that the drifters had all entered the puppet plate, she quickly put them into her storage ring and laughed. Finally, it has stopped. The world is finally quiet. Ha! This fellow had fully demonstrated what it meant to be arrogant when one was pleased with oneself. He was so cocky that he wished he could vent all the frustrations he had for the past few days. Just as this fellow was being cocky, he felt the ground tremble violently. Then, he heard a faint noise coming from afar. Yun Chujio was stunned. What happened? Because the sky was completely dark and the distance was very far, Yun Chujio couldn't see anything even if she stretched her neck. This fellow felt that it was better to go over and take a look. Hence, he put the small silver snake into his sleeve pocket and went to the encampment. At this moment, not only was the encampment of the Nameless Sword sect in chaos, the encampment of the other 5 great sects was also in chaos. In the middle of it was the terrified cries of the crowd. How did the giant sword suddenly turn into dust? What's going on? Yeah, it turned into dust right in front of our eyes. How did this happen? Did the giant sword just disappear like that? Is there no more Eye of Sword intent in the future? Only then did Yun Chujio realize that the giant sword that was originally standing there had disappeared without a trace. There was only a huge pit left on the ground, and there was a thick layer of dust on the ground. This guy had an inexplicable sense of guilt. This should, probably 80% have nothing to do with her keeping the drifters, right? This guy had done his own ideological work for her, so it definitely didn't matter. The drifter was the drifter, and the huge sword was the huge sword. How could they be mixed together? Or maybe it had something to do with the bone that the gigolo wanted. That shouldn't be either. It was just a small piece of bone. How could it be a huge sword? Moreover, the drifter had taken the bone away for some time, and this huge sword had turned into powder after. It must have nothing to do with the bone, right? Although this guy felt a little guilty, his expression was the same as everyone else's. He was shocked and terrified at the same time. His acting skills were simply amazing. At this moment, Wan Pengcheng shouted sharply, "This must have something to do with Yun Chujio." If she hadn't taken out the Buddhist scriptures, the giant sword wouldn't have made a buzzing sound. The buzzing sound must have been caused by something unexpected happening to the giant sword, which was why it turned into dust in the end. Wan Pengcheng's words instantly made Yun Chujio become the focus of everyone's attention. Everyone looked at her. If ordinary people were surrounded by such a formation, they might have already been scared silly. However, Yun Chujio laughed coldly. "Wan Pengcheng, you've been targeting me repeatedly previously. For the sake of the overall situation, I didn't argue with you. I've even been expelled a few times. I didn't say anything. However, now that you've thrown such a big blame on me, I have no choice but to say a few words. You said that it was because I took out the Buddhist scriptures that the huge sword turned into dust. Then let me ask you, if the huge sword had already experienced some changes, why was everyone able to comprehend the sword intent normally? Moreover, when the huge sword turned into dust, I wasn't here at all. If you want to add to the crime, why don't you say anything?" Chapter 4071. Someone would exonerate her. Wan Pengcheng was about to defend himself when Yun Chujio raised her voice and continued. "Also, why is the giant sword afraid of the Buddhist scriptures? Everyone knows that the Buddhist scriptures restrain evil things. Could it be that the giant sword is an evil thing? Besides, how could an ordinary Buddhist scripture turn a giant sword into dust? Don't you think what you said is ridiculous? According to what you said, the Buddhist scripture has such great power. In the future, there's no need to fight against the enemy. Just take out the Buddhist scripture and recite it. Even if you and I usually have a feud, you shouldn't mislead people and draw their attention to me. You've drawn things to me again and again. Could it be that you have a guilty conscience? Could it be that the destruction of this huge sword has something to do with you?" Wan Pengcheng instantly exploded. You're bullshit. How could I have such a great ability to destroy the huge sword? It was caused by a jinx like you. Ever since you came to our nameless sword sect, there have been many changes in the sword pool. You're the nemesis of the sword, so this huge sword was destroyed by you. Yun Chujio's expression was even more mocking. "If I really had that ability, I would be the first to kill you. It's all nonsense. I don't want to say any more. I believe that everyone has their own judgment. The Buddhist scriptures destroying the huge sword is simply a joke. Instead of wasting time here, why don't we leave this place quickly? If the huge sword is destroyed and we can't get out, that would be bad." The crowd didn't believe that it was because of the Buddhist scriptures. It was too far-fetched. Besides, the huge sword had existed for an unknown amount of time. Perhaps it was because it had existed for too long that it had turned into dust. The humming sound from before should be the precursor. It was just that Wan Pengcheng had blamed it on Yun Chujio, so the crowd didn't pay attention to it. Most importantly, everyone felt that Yun Chujio was right. Now that the huge sword had been destroyed, they did not know if it would affect the opening of the enchantment tomorrow. It was better to hurry to the exit of the enchantment. Anyway, Yun Chujio could not escape. It was not too late to interrogate her after she got out. Therefore, the six sects decided that it was more important to retreat quickly. Everyone began to retreat in a hurry. Their hearts were shrouded in a layer of shadow. It was better not to have any unforeseen circumstances. If they were really trapped here, it would be terrible. However, it was fortunate that the enchantment opened on time the next day. Everyone could not wait to use the Eye of Sword Intent. After everyone came out, they heard a huge explosion. The enchantment began to tremble violently, and the Eye of Sword Intent disappeared in front of everyone. Although everyone did not see it with their own eyes, from the sound, the Eye of Sword Intent must have collapsed. There would be no more so-called Eye of Sword Intent in the future. At this moment, Xiao Yu from the Flying Flower Island sneered and said, "Now that we have come out from the Eye of Sword Intent, shouldn't we deal with Yun Chujio?" Everyone's attention fell on Yun Chujio again. Yun Chujio's expression was very calm because she knew that someone would excuse her. "Sure enough," Elder One said with a gloomy expression, "everyone, Yun Chujio has already made it very clear. How can a little girl like her destroy a huge sword? Furthermore, she was banished 10 miles away at that time and did not have the chance to make a move. Therefore, this matter has nothing to do with her." Peng Cheng, this child, framed a disciple of the same sect because of a small personal grudge. This old man will definitely discipline him severely when I return. As for the reason why the huge sword was destroyed, we still have to think long and hard. Most likely, it was because of the passage of time that such a change occurred. Chapter 4072. Elder One's help in exonerating her. The other sects were fine, but the Nameless Sword sect members all looked at Elder One in surprise. Who didn't know that Elder One hated Yun Chujio to the core? Why would he speak up for her? Wan Pengcheng was even more dumbfounded. Had his grandfather gone senile? He was about to speak, but he was so frightened by Elder Wan's fierce gaze that he didn't dare to make a sound. Although Elder Duanmu did not understand, he still echoed, "Elder Wan is right. This is just a small grudge between two disciples of our sect." Yun Chujio was a little girl who was at the 9th layer of spiritual perception. Even if she had the intention to do so, she did not have the ability to do so, much less not have the intention to do so. Everyone here is sensible and experienced. Naturally, they can determine whether this matter is true or false. This matter was started by my Nameless Sword sect, so I apologize to all of you. Elder Duanmu said and was about to bow when an elder from Xuanji sect, who was the closest to him, hurriedly held him up. He smiled and said, "Elder Duanmu, you're being too serious. It's just the noise of a child. We're not 3-year-old children, so how could we really believe such nonsense?" Yun Chujio felt a little sour when she saw Elder Duanmu's reaction. Although this old man Duanmu did not treat her well at the beginning, he had spoken up for her many times this time. In the future, she would definitely find an opportunity to mend the broken 1,000-cleaver sword. It could be considered as a form of repayment to him. As for why Elder One spoke up for Yun Chujio, it was because Yun Chujio found an opportunity on the way out. She said to him alone, "Elder One, it's best that you clean up the aftermath of your grandson's stupid actions. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." Elder One was furious. Was this Yun Chujio mentally ill? What right did she have to threaten him? Moreover, what Wan Pengcheng had done was very in line with his intentions. It would be best if he could get rid of Yun Chujio this time. Yun Chujio naturally saw through Elder One's thoughts. She sneered and said, "Do you think it's great to get rid of me with this matter? Humph, it's really stupid. The crowd might not really convict me. After all, I didn't do this in the first place. A few Buddhist scriptures destroyed the huge sword. It would make people laugh their heads off." When Elder One heard Yun Chujio's words, a cold smile appeared on his face. It was obvious that he did not think much of it. Yun Chujio continued, "To take a step back, everyone really believed Wan Pengcheng's words. They felt that the huge sword was destroyed by me. How do you think they will deal with me? Kill me? No, what they will be most interested in is how I destroyed the huge sword and why. When the time comes, I will say that this was the will of the Nameless Ancestor. I obtained the Buddhist scriptures from the Nameless Ancestor's cave abode. What do you think will happen when the time comes? When the time comes, the Nameless Sword sect will become the target of public criticism. And all of this is because of that brainless fool, Wan Pengcheng. Even if I don't have a good ending, you will never be able to sit on the position of the Nameless Sword sect master. Moreover, even if everyone didn't use their brains to condemn me, I might not necessarily die. After all, I was using the name of the Nameless Patriarch. If you guys didn't protect my little life, that would be disobeying the Nameless Patriarch's orders. Do you think that others won't believe my words? TSK, they will believe it. After all, how could a little trash like me destroy the giant sword? Moreover, they will also attribute my previous epiphany to the Nameless Patriarch. So, you only have one choice now, and that is to clean up the aftermath for that stupid grandson of yours. Elder Wan's originally cold smile became very cold. He had to admit that Yun Chujia's analysis was correct. Everyone might not really convict her. Moreover, if she pushed the blame onto the Nameless Patriarch, the development of the matter would really be as she had predicted. His situation in the Nameless Sword sect would become more delicate. Therefore, despite Elder Wan's reluctance, after weighing the pros and cons, he still stepped forward to exonerate Yun Chujio. Chapter 4073. One mountain cannot accommodate two tigers. As Elder Wan and Elder Duanmu had attributed the matter to the personal grudges of their disciples, coupled with the fact that the destruction of the huge sword from the Buddhist scriptures was indeed a little far-fetched, everyone decided to put the matter behind them. Xiao Yu originally thought that Yun Chujio would be in big trouble this time, but she did not expect that nothing would happen in the end. Although she was very unwilling, the elders of the 6 great factions had already expressed their stance. If she still insisted, that would be asking for trouble. However, it was fortunate that she had comprehended 2 sword intents this time, and it was said that although Yun Chujio had an epiphany, she had not even comprehended a single sword intent. Sooner or later, she would be taught a lesson. Everyone sighed with emotion. Looking at it from another angle, they were also lucky. After all, no one would be able to enter the Eye of Sword intent from now on. Everyone exchanged a few more pleasantries before returning to their respective areas. As soon as they boarded the flying spirit tool, Wan Pengcheng was called away by Elder Wan. When he returned, his expression was very unsightly. He said to Yun Chujio viciously, "Consider yourself lucky this time." "Well, just wait and see." Yun Chujio smiled faintly and said, "We'll be waiting for you at any time." Wan Pengcheng felt even more stifled when he saw Yun Chujio like this. He wished that he could strangle Yun Chujio to death on the spot. However, when he thought of Elder Wan's words, he could only return to his seat angrily. His scoundrel friends shouted, "Senior Brother Wan, you don't have to lower yourself to her level. This time, Liao Tao and the others have suffered a great loss. The next inner sect competition will be held in a few days. When that time comes, there will be a good show to watch." That's right. This time, they won't do any battle team challenge. They will only do one-on-one challenges. When that time comes, Yun Chujio and the others will definitely be beaten up badly. That's right. If I were from Team Sun, I would also try my best to teach them a lesson. Moreover, some people wasted this opportunity for nothing. They actually didn't even comprehend a single sword intent. What a loss. The voices of those few people were very loud. It was obvious that they were intentionally listening to Yun Chujio and the others. Yun Chujio's expression was normal, but the faces of Zhao Hui and the others were a little pale. The 6 of them were not bad. They had all comprehended the sword intent, but even so, they were not a match for Liao Tao and the others. At that time, they might really have to be beaten up. Yun Chujio glanced at them and said in a low voice, "What are you afraid of? When the time comes, you can just admit defeat." The 6 of them thought for a moment. That's right. Since their goal had been achieved, there was no point in getting a ranking within the top 100. They could just go up on the stage and admit defeat. The 6 of them suddenly had an epiphany and threw this matter to the back of their minds. On this day, the flying spirit tool arrived at the Nameless Sword sect. Elder Duanmu and Elder Wan went to report the situation to Master Ouyang, while the others went back to their residences. After Yun Chujio returned to her own courtyard, she washed up and then coiled the small silver snake on her arm and went into the courtyard, ready to play with those drifters. Yun Chujio took out the puppet disc and released both types of drifters. Then she looked at them with a smile. The native drifters had never left the Eye of Sword intent before. When they saw the things in the courtyard, they were very curious. Especially when they saw the two swings, they immediately flew over impatiently. When the sword pool drifters saw this, they were instantly unhappy. It was one thing to snatch their puppet discs, but now they actually wanted to take over their swings? They were courting death. Thus, the two types of drifters started fighting again. Hei Shinjio, who was watching the show while nibbling on the spirit fruit, was elated. This was exactly what she had expected. As the saying went, there was no room for two tigers on one mountain. These two types of drifters would have to fight in the future. Chapter 4074. You were a snake. To begin with, the battle between the two types of drifters was extremely intense. Even after the sun had set, there was still no victor. The drifters from the sword pool had not returned to the sword pool for many days. In the end, they flew away in a huff and forgot to bring the puppet discs with them. Those native drifters did not understand and followed curiously. Yun Chujio slowly put the 3 puppet discs into her storage ring. The days ahead would definitely be very interesting. This fellow yawned and said to the little silver snake, "Little baby, it's time for the lullaby." Although a certain pitiful being was extremely unwilling, he could only sing the lullaby to coax the little rascal to sleep. Yun Chujio had been very tired these few days, so she fell asleep before the certain being could finish singing the lullaby. The certain being looked at her sweet sleeping face with doting eyes. After looking at it for a while, he finally took out the bone that he had obtained previously. The small silver snake's vertical pupils were slightly confused. He did not know the origin of these bones, but he vaguely knew that these bones were very important to him. Moreover, there was naturally a method to use the secret technique in his mind. He had carefully studied the 3 bones that he had obtained. They were only the size of a thumb. They seemed to be human bones, but they did not seem to be human bones. What kind of bones were these? Who was he in the past? As the layers of seals were removed, his original understanding was overturned again and again. He originally thought that he was only the saint of the Dark Continent, but he was not. Who was he? The more he thought about it, the more clueless he became. Di Baiming could not help but fall into a state of obsession. The surrounding spiritual energy began to distort, but Di Baiming did not notice it at all. Suddenly, a dazzling light flashed, and Yun Chujio opened her eyes in shock. When this guy saw the beautiful scene in front of him, he almost drooled. Di Baiming had also recovered from his obsession at this time. He felt a chill on his body. He looked down, and there was only one thought in his mind: I have run away again. Hei Shinjio quickly covered her eyes with her claws, but the gap between her fingers was enough for this guy to peek openly. After a moment of blankness, Di Baiming pulled the quilt that was originally covering Yun Chujio to cover his body. Hei Shinjio, who was covering her claws to peek, was annoyed. She hadn't even seen it clearly, but it was covered. What a pity! However, this guy was afraid that Di Baiming would settle the score later, so he said without thinking twice, "Prince Charming, I'm covering my eyes. I didn't see anything." Di Baiming was both embarrassed and angry. He snorted and thought to himself, "Who the hell would believe you?" After he put on his clothes, he threw the quilt on Yun Chujio again. For a moment, the atmosphere in the room was very awkward. Of course, only a certain someone was embarrassed. Hei Shinjio was a little nervous. She was thinking about what to say. It was best if she could make a certain someone forget her crime. This fellow said dryly, "Prince Charming, why did you suddenly become a human?" Di Baiming briefly recounted what had happened just now. His heart skipped a beat. It seemed that with this bone by his side, as long as the surrounding spiritual energy changed drastically, he would be able to return to his original form. Yun Chujio also thought of this point. While she was happy for Di Baiming, she was also a little disappointed. The days where she could bully the pretty boy as she pleased were gone forever. If she had known earlier, she should have bullied him earlier. In order to change the topic, he said, "Prince Charming, you said that you don't know the origin of these bones. I think these bones might be snake bones because you are a snake." Chapter 4075. Hei Shinjio, who was embarrassed and angry Yun Chujio, also finished her sentence and realized that her scalp was a little numb. It seemed that the gigolo had warned her that she was not a snake. This guy cursed in his heart. She had already become a snake several times, yet she still refused to admit it. Men were indeed psychopaths who did not mean what they said. As expected, Di Biming said coldly, "Little Jio, I told you that I am not a snake. Have you forgotten?" Hei Shinjio laughed dryly. I haven't forgotten. I was just joking. How can a handsome man like you be a snake?" Seeing that Di Biming's expression was still cold, she quickly continued, "Prince Charming, don't be angry. If you feel that it's not balanced, then it'll be a snake. It'll be a beautiful snake, it'll be a little snake spirit." Hei Xinjia's words suddenly stopped, because this guy was knocked on the bed. Just as the two of them were having an intimate moment, a certain someone's body stiffened. He suddenly raised his head and saw strands of drifters floating in the room, watching them calmly. Di Biming's body was instantly filled with a biting cold aura, and those drifters walked away eagerly. After being disturbed by the drifters, the romance between the two immediately turned into anger. Hei Shinjio rushed out barefooted with a few lotus flowers in her hands. Damn it, if she didn't deal with these drifters today, her name wouldn't be Yun Chujio. Di Biming sighed silently. He walked out of the house and picked up Hei Shinjio, who was barefooted. Hei Shinjio waved the lotus flowers and said through gritted teeth, "Idol, put me down. I must fight to the death with them today. They actually peeked at us making out. They are openly declaring war on me." The reason why Hei Shinjio was so angry was mostly because she was embarrassed. Although she was thick-skinned, it was still embarrassing to be seen as a monkey by those drifters, okay? Di Biming saw Yun Chujio's angry look and laughed lightly. He carried her into the house and gently put her on the bed. Then he patted her little head and said, "Why bother with them? It's getting late. Go to sleep." When Yun Chujio heard Di Biming's words, she remembered that she had been kissed until she was dizzy. She immediately hid under the blanket. She was too ashamed to face anyone. It was rare for Di Biming to see Yun Chujio so shy. He did not continue to tease her. Instead, he used his hand to pat her gently. Hei Shinjio fell asleep in a daze. When she fell asleep, Di Biming's eyes flashed with a cold light. He got off the bed and went into the courtyard. The drifters were jumping around in the courtyard. When they saw Di Biming coming out, they trembled and moved to the top of the swing. They didn't differentiate between the sword pool drifters and the native drifters. It was more important for them to huddle together to stay warm. They didn't want to be so cowardly. When this man was a small snake, he was just a piece of trash. How did he become a human and become so scared? Di Biming glanced at these drifters and slowly said, "No matter what your motive is for getting close to little Jio, if you dare to hurt her, even if you don't die, I will make you wish you were dead." Those drifters gathered into two blurry human figures and kept nodding. They were almost kneeling on the ground to show their submission. Seeing this, Di Biming turned around and returned to the house. He let go of his right hand. There was a thumb-sized bone in his palm. He had borrowed a portion of the bone's power to intimidate the drifters. Chapter 4076. Only envied Mandarin ducks and not immortals. While Di Biming was deep in thought, he heard Yun Chujio mumble in her sleep, "Little baby, come, give me a kiss." A certain someone. He laughed bitterly and put the bone into his storage ring. Then he closed his clothes and lay down. Yun Chujio consciously leaned over and nestled her little head in his embrace. Di Biming kissed her forehead. Even though the future was dangerous, he believed that the day would come when the clouds would rise and the sun would rise. The next day, Hei Shinjio opened her eyes and saw Di Biming lying beside her. He was determined to take advantage of her, and then, the bed knocked on him again. The two of them lingered for a while before they got up to wash up. Hei Shinjio thought about what happened last night and gritted her teeth in hatred. When she pushed the door open, she found that the two groups of drifters were each occupying a swing. They seemed very obedient? Obedient? Could these things be associated with being obedient? Yun Chujio glared at the drifters fiercely before turning around and returning to the house. During breakfast, Yun Chujio hesitated for a moment before asking, "Idol, you've recovered your original form. Are you going to leave soon?" Di Baiming originally wanted to leave after breakfast, but when he saw Yun Chujio's reluctant expression, he said against his will, "I have nothing to do for the time being. I'll accompany you for a few days before leaving." Hearing that, Yun Chujio immediately beamed with joy. Then, she ate 2 more meat buns. As long as she wasn't in a good mood and didn't have an appetite, it was fine. Because of the handsome man's company, Yun Chujio didn't leave the courtyard for a few days in a row. During that time, Zhao Hui and Li Zhuangji sent messages to urge her to go to class, but this guy rejected them on the grounds that he was sick. What bullshit swordsmanship class? Sword formation class? He didn't go to any of them. He could punish them however he wanted. Nothing was more important than having fair skin and beautiful long legs. This guy was in a good mood and he liked those drifters a lot. Occasionally he would play with them for a while Di Baiming stood at the side and watched with a smile. When Dog 2, who was holding mushrooms in the corner, saw this scene, it felt sour in its heart. So this was the legendary envy of lovers, not immortals. When would it be able to find its little baby? On this day, Di Baiming and Yun Chujio were playing chess in the courtyard. Of course, Hei Xinjiu had done many things like stealing chess pieces, so a certain deity pretended not to see it. At this moment, Di Baiming's voice transmission talisman started to tremble. Di Baiming frowned after he sent his divine sense in. "Prince Charming, what's wrong? Who sent it to you?" Hei Xinjiu asked while secretly changing the position of a chess piece. Di Baiming did not expose her and said indifferently, "It's from Shui Wuji. It's nothing. Let's continue." Seeing this, Yun Chujio did not take it seriously. However, after a while, her voice transmission talisman began to vibrate. Shui Wuji's hopeless voice came from it. "Little Sister Jiu, has that facial paralysis recovered? If it has, hurry up and ask him to come back. The little madman and I will be chased until we become homeless dogs." Yun Chujio was stunned. She recalled that Di Baiming had been absent-minded for the past few days, and her heart was sour and sweet. She suddenly understood that it was not that Di Baiming had nothing to do, but he had deliberately stayed behind to accompany her. Shui Wuji and Enfeng must have been hunted down until they had no choice. Otherwise, they would not have run back to Towering Sky Continent. When Di Baiming saw Yun Chujio's expression, he knew that it was Shui Wuji who sent her a voice transmission talisman. He immediately said indifferently, "Shui Wuji, that idiot, always exaggerates. You don't have to pay attention to him." Chapter 4077. However, Yun Chujio reached out and grabbed Di Baiming's hand. She said word by word, "Idol, what I want is not a day and night of intimacy, but our future. So you go and do your work. I'm fine." Di Baiming held Yun Chujio's hand in his own. He wanted to say something, but he did not know where to start. He owed her too much. Any words would be useless. All he could do was to use all his methods, stand at the peak of this world and protect her for the rest of her life. The two of them looked at each other for a long time. Yun Chujio took the initiative to pull her hand out of Di Baiming's hand. She bared her little white teeth and said, "Idol, hurry up and leave. Just because I'm with you, I haven't gone out for a few days. It's suffocating me." Di Baiming naturally knew that Yun Chujio said this on purpose, but he did not expose her. He said cooperatively, "Cultivate well and don't get into trouble. Otherwise, I won't forgive you." In the past, Yun Chujio would snort in disdain when she heard these words. She thought that the gigolo was acting pretentious, but now it sounded full of reluctance and longing. There was also some sadness about parting. She tried her best to hold back the bitterness in her eyes. She squeezed out a smile and said, "I know. I'm such a quiet girl. How can I cause trouble?" Di Baiming did not say anything, but he hugged her tightly in his arms. A watery light flashed in his deep eyes. He finally understood what it meant to be involuntarily. He really wanted to be by her side at all times, but for the sake of their future. For the people they cared about, they could only choose to part. In the end, he still did not say anything and turned around to leave. Yun Chujio looked at the afterimages that disappeared into the distance. She was stunned and did not say anything. For a moment, the courtyard was filled with a sad atmosphere. Even the drifters could feel it. They huddled on the swing and looked at Yun Chujio curiously. Dog 2 in the corner also shed a few tears. It was too touching. No, it was too touching. Was this love? While Yun Chujio was in a daze, the drifters sneaked into the house. Yun Chujio knew that someone was coming. She used her sleeve to wipe her face, because she didn't know when, but her face was already full of tears. Soon, the voices of Zhao Hui and the others came from outside the courtyard. Junior sister Yun, we're here to see you. Zhao Hui and the others had been urging Yun Chujio to go to class for the past few days, but she refused on the grounds that she was sick. After some discussion, they decided to come and see her. Yun Chujio opened the courtyard door, and Zhao Hui and the others walked in. Zhao Hui saw that Yun Chujio's eyes were red, and he couldn't help but ask anxiously, Junior sister Yun, what happened? Are you crying? Li Zhuangji and the others also looked at her with concern. After experiencing so many things, they had already treated Yun Chujio as a life-and-death friend. Yun Chujio sighed and said, I haven't been feeling well these few days. I have been sneezing, so my eyes have become like this. Although Zhao Hui and the others felt that what Yun Chujio said seemed to be a bit far-fetched, but when they thought of Yun Chujio's outgoing personality, they felt that she didn't seem like someone who would let them suffer silently, so they believed her. They asked a few more questions with concern and then began to chat. Junior sister Yun, you haven't gone out these few days because you don't know that Liao Tao and the others have already spread the word that they will teach us a lesson in the inner sect competition in a few days. Li Zhuangji curled his lips and said. Zhao Hui echoed, yes, there are already many people who are prepared to bet on the same day. After all, it's impossible for us to win. However, I reckon that no one will bet on US winning. Those people will bet for nothing. Chapter 4078 made her happy just thinking about it. When Yun Chujio heard their words, her heart skipped a beat. Without the gigolo by her side, it was not bad to earn some money to spend. Immediately, she said to Zhao Hui and the others, do you guys want to be rich? Zhao Hui and the others rolled their eyes. Wasn't this nonsense? Who didn't want to be rich? Especially people like them who were heavily in debt. They wanted to be rich. However, how could they make a fortune? In a few days, during the inner sect competition, I will think of a way to be the last to appear. All of you bet on me to win. BT as much money as you have. I guarantee that you will make a fortune. Yun Chujio said with a smile. Li Zhuangji and the others were dumbfounded. Are you sure that you will make a fortune and not lose everything? Li Zhuangji couldn't hold it in any longer. He asked, Junior sister Yun, do you mean that you can beat Liao Tao? Although you have reached the 9th level of psychic power in the Eye of Sword Intent, Liao Tao is at the 5th level of psychic power, and you can't use any supporting techniques during the competition. How can you be his opponent? Yes, Junior sister Yun. A wise man doesn't lose when the odds are against him. Let's not fight with him. We can challenge him again in the future, Zhao Hui advised. Yun Chujio blinked her eyes. Don't worry. I have my own way to defeat him. Just listen to me. Liao Tao and the others looked at each other. Although they felt that Yun Chujio was bragging, they did not dare to disobey her. They felt that they were going to be completely broke. The reason why Yun Chujio was so certain was very simple. Although she could not openly use support methods, she could use them secretly. Those drifters were giving her trouble. It was time for them to make a contribution. If there were too many of them, it would be easy for others to notice. 1 or 2 strands wouldn't be a problem. When the time came, Liao Tao would definitely lose his life. Just thinking about it made him happy. Zhao Hui knew that it was very difficult to change Yun Chujio's decision, so he didn't say anything more. Instead, he changed the topic and said, oh right, Junior sister Yun, something big happened these few days. The Flying Flower Island captured an extremely rare blue-tailed giant bone whale. Island Master Chi of the Flying Flower Island has sent an invitation to our Master Ouyang. He has agreed to hold a whale feast on the Flying Flower Island in half a month. It will definitely be a grand event. Yun Chujio curled her lips. Isn't it just a few old men eating and drinking together? What kind of grand event is this? By the way, the meat of the blue-tailed bone whale is very delicious? The corners of Zhao Hui and the other's eyes twitched. Your focus has gone astray, all right? A normal person's focus should be on the gathering of the leaders of the 6 great sections. On the other hand, her focus was on whether the blue-tailed bone whale was delicious or not. Junior Sister Yun, you might not know this, but every 5 years, the 6 great sects gather together. It's called a gathering, but it's really a sparring session. This year, it happens to be the Flying Flower Island's turn to be the host. Therefore, this so-called whale feast is just a gimmick. In reality, it's still a competition of strength between the 6 factions. However, every year, the 9 pavilions take first place, so the remaining 5 major factions can only compete for second place. In addition, this year's event is held on the Flying Flower Island, which is even more disadvantageous to our nameless sword sect. I reckon that the best ranking would be 4th place. After all, there's still the Ascension Island ahead. Zhao Hui explained. Yun Chujio finally came to a realization. However, she had seen too many such tricks. Moreover, they had nothing to do with small shrimps like her, so she just listened to them. It was a pity that she wouldn't be able to taste the blue-tailed bone whale. However, she could ask Old Man Duanmu and Old Man Dongfang to get some for her to try. Chapter 4079 failed to infuse sword intent. The few of them chatted for a while more before Zhao Hui and the others left. Yun Chujio blinked her eyes and decided to go to Elder Duanmu's place to brush her face. This way, after a few days, she would be able to ask him to bring back some whale meat for her to taste. When Yun Chujio arrived at Elder Duanmu's No. 1 sword forging hall, this fellow first expressed his gratitude to Elder Duanmu in a serious manner. Then he continued to chat with her. Although Elder Duanmu didn't pay much attention to her, he didn't chase her away and just let her talk. After a while, Elder Duanmu said, I heard that Liao Tao wants to challenge you. What do you plan to do? If you want to fight, then let's fight. Do you think I'm afraid of him? Yun Chujio said indifferently. Nonsense. Your spiritual power is so much weaker than his, and he hates you. Once you fight, he will not show mercy. You might be seriously injured. How about this, you either admit defeat or forfeit on that day. Although your face is a little ugly, it's still better than getting injured. For someone with Elder Duanmu's personality to be able to say so much, he had to say that he was really thinking about Yun Chujio. In fact, he was also puzzled. He had originally disliked this little girl, but for some reason he now wanted to protect her. Perhaps it was because the toughness of her beating the sword billet in the inner sect selection had moved him, or perhaps it was because the little girl often came over these days. Although his shameless appearance gave him a headache, he had to say. It had been a long time since he had seen such a genuine child. Hearing Elder Duanmu's words, Yun Chujio shook her head. I will not admit defeat or forfeit. That Liao Tao is not my match at all. Elder Duanmu's face darkened when he saw Yun Chujio's shameless bragging. Nonsense. You're only at the 9th level of psychic power, but that Liao Tao is at the 5th level of psychic power. How can you be stronger than him? Yun Chujio smiled mischievously. That Liao Tao is brainless. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been the first to be kicked off the stage last time. I have my own ways to deal with him. Elder Duanmu, let's not talk about this matter for now. Can you tell me the steps to beat the sword billet? I originally wanted to consult Elder Dongfang, but I felt that your attainments were higher, so I decided to consult you. When Elder Duanmu heard Yun Chujio say that his attainments were higher than Elder Dongfang's, he immediately threw the matter of the competition to the back of his mind. His expression also eased up a lot, and he immediately told Yun Chujio the steps to forge the sword. In fact, Yun Chujio had also learned the method to forge a sword from Jianfeng. However, she had not been able to successfully infuse sword intent into it, and she had not had the chance to try it out even after leaving the sword hut. The reason she had asked Elder Duanmu for advice was to find an excuse. Otherwise, there was no way to explain that she knew how to forge a sword. She planned to find a way to repair Elder Duanmu's heaven-cleaving sword after she had learned how to infuse sword intent into it. Seeing that Yun Chujio knew how to do it, Elder Duanmu was so happy that his beard stood up. He felt that this fellow was a genius in forging swords. How would he know that this fellow was tortured by Jianfeng? It was impossible for him not to know. However, when it came to infusing sword intent, Yun Chujio tried several times but failed. Elder Duanmu consoled her. This failure is very normal. All sword forgers need a very long time to succeed. If you practice more in the future, you will definitely succeed. Although Yun Chujio was a little annoyed, she still nodded. Perhaps she could succeed after practicing a few more times in the future. Chapter 4080, Fast or slow. As the sky was already dark, Yun Chujio left the number 1 sword forging hall with a dejected expression. As she walked, she pondered over it. Her steps were all correct, so there was no reason for her to fail. Could it be that the chaotic sword intent she comprehended was too strange, so there was no way for her to successfully infuse it? When she thought of the sword intent, this fellow couldn't help but get angry. If it wasn't for the troublemakers, she might have been able to successfully infuse it into the eye of sword intent as well. When she arrived at the courtyard, she had just pushed open the door when the 2 groups of drifters came up to her. However, due to Di Baiming's warning, they didn't get too close and only jumped in front of her. Yun Chujio was in a bad mood because she didn't successfully infuse sword intent, therefore, she didn't have a good expression towards these drifters. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you guys, would I not be able to comprehend sword intent? Maybe if I knew 10 or 8 types of sword intent, I would be able to infuse sword intent successfully. Get lost. After saying that, Yun Chujio ignored the drifters and went straight into the house. The drifters were stunned for a moment before they gathered together as if they were discussing something. The next morning, before Yun Chujio got out of bed, her identity jade tokens started to tremble. Yun Chujio looked at it in annoyance and realized that it was from Elder Duanmu. The plan for the day lies in the morning. Quickly come over and practice your sword forging. Yun Chujio, what kind of madness is this old man Duanmu having? If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have asked for sword forging on a whim yesterday. Now, she was being targeted. Although this fellow didn't want to go, Elder Duanmu was her backing now and she couldn't afford to offend him. Therefore, this fellow had no choice but to wash up and leave the house with a meat bun in his mouth. However, to her surprise, there were 2 red figures gathered in the courtyard. When they saw her coming out, the 2 figures began to compete with their swords. Of course, this sword was also formed from the red mist. Yun Chujio was puzzled. Did the native Piao and the sword pool Piao start fighting again? Yun Chujio originally did not intend to pay attention to them. However, just as she was about to leave, she was attracted by the fight between the 2 figures. The drifter of the sword pool had also transformed into a human figure to compete with Yun Chujio. However, in order to accommodate Yun Chujio, its speed and moves had been greatly reduced. At this time, when it competed with the native drifter, it was simply dazzling. The meat bun in Yun Chujio's mouth fell to the ground. She had suffered a huge impact. So the sword could still be used like that? So the sword could be used in that way? So the seemingly simple and crude sword could actually have such great power? Looking at her, she realized that the sword pool drifter's sword speed was very fast, but the native drifter's speed was very slow. But even so, the 2 of them were actually unable to separate? What was going on? Wasn't there a saying that in the world of martial arts, speed was the only thing that could not be broken? How could the indigenous drifter be able to deal with it despite being so slow? This thought flashed through her mind as she realized that the sword pool drifter's sword speed had started to slow down. On the other hand, the indigenous drifter's sword speed had become as fast as the wind. The 2 of them were actually evenly matched. Following that, the 2 figures slowed down one moment and then sped up the next. At times, they were extremely slow and at other times, they were as fast as lightning. However, no matter how the other party changed, the other party would be able to find a corresponding solution. The more Yun Chujio watched, the more fascinated she became. She had long forgotten about the matter of Elder Duanmu looking for her. In the end, she could not help but take out a treasured sword and wave it around. Chapter 4081. The practice method of the fast sword intent. Yunchujio only imitated the movements of the two drifters in the beginning, but later on, she was immersed in her own thoughts. She vaguely felt that the two drifters were instructing her on something. Could it be the sword intent? One fast and one slow. Could it be the fast sword intent and the slow sword intent? She could understand one of the drifters using the fast sword that was as fast as the wind. After all, in the world of martial arts, speed was the only thing that could not be broken. However, why was the other drifter still able to withstand the slow sword technique? Yun Chujio could not figure it out no matter what. Hence, she temporarily put down the slow sword technique and began to ponder over the fast sword techniques of the drifters. If she could master the fast sword intent, it would be wonderful. However, what exactly was the fast sword intent? Fast gusts of wind, lightning bolts, and waterfalls flashed through Yun Chujio's mind. These were undoubtedly fast. Could it be that she had to increase the deceleration speed to such a fast speed to master the fast sword intent? Yun Chujio felt that it was too difficult. Her spiritual power could not be compared to the drifters, and her movement techniques were not as agile as the drifters. How could she possibly reach their sword speed? The more Yun Chujio thought about it, the more she felt that it was impossible. Just when she was at a loss, her identity jade token started to tremble again. She impatiently sent her spiritual sense in. Elder Duanmis' displeased voice came from inside. Didn't you say that you were going to come over to train your sword? Why aren't you here yet? Yun Chujio, when did she say that she was going to come over? This fellow shook his head. Since he was at a loss, it wouldn't be too bad to ask old man Duanmu for advice. Therefore, she put away the tree branches and left the courtyard without caring about the drifters on the swings. When she arrived at Elder Duanmis' place, it was already close to noon. Elder Duanmis' face was gloomy, and it was obvious that he was very dissatisfied with Yun Chujio's tardiness. Yun Chujio hurriedly said, Elder Duanmu, I didn't mean to be late. It's because I suddenly gained some insight into sword intent when I was about to leave. Hearing that, Elder Duanmu hurriedly asked, You have gained insight into sword intent? What sword intent? Yun Chujio laughed dryly. I just have some clues, but I haven't completely comprehended it. I was just about to ask for your advice. Elder Duanmu frowned. He felt that Yun Chujio was most likely lying to cover up her lateness, so he asked with some suspicion, Then tell me, what have you comprehended? In the world of martial arts, speed is the only thing that cannot be broken. What I've comprehended is the fast sword intent, but after thinking about it, how can my sword technique be as fast as lightning and sudden wind? So, is it impossible to comprehend the fast sword intent? Yun Chujio said with a little confusion. Hearing Yun Chujio's words, Elder Duanmu knew that she had indeed comprehended something. His expression eased up a little and he said, The fast sword intent is the sword intent that the disciples of our nameless sword sect have comprehended the most. It is also the sword intent that is the easiest to comprehend. If you want to comprehend the fast sword intent, it is useless to just ponder about it. Then what should we do? Yun Chujio's eyes lit up. Did this mean that there was a quick method? Many disciples will go to the waterfall at the back of the mountain to practice their sword speed and comprehend the fast sword intent. If your sword speed is fast enough to pass through the waterfall and there isn't a drop of water on your sword, then you won't be far from comprehending the sword intent. Of course, this is only a supplementary method. It mainly depends on your own comprehension ability, Elder Duanmu said. Chapter 4082, Waterfall. Yun Chujio was dumbfounded when she heard Elder Duanmis' words. Why did this method sound so unreliable? Wasn't there a saying that said that water flows faster when it is cut off by a knife? How could it not be stained by water droplets? However, she felt that Elder Duanmu was not a person who would spout nonsense, so she temporarily memorized this method. Then she asked, Elder Duanmu, besides the fast sword intent, is there also the slow sword intent? The fast sword intent was still understandable, But how could the slow sword intent be explained? His sword was as slow as a tortoise. How could he possibly win against the rabbit? Elder Duanmu was stunned by this strange analogy, but he still said, "Of course there is the slow sword intent, but very few people can master the slow sword intent, and I haven't seen through the profoundness of it. I advise you to focus on comprehending the fast sword intent. After all, the slow sword intent is too difficult." Yun Chujio blinked her eyes. Then, is it possible to master these two sword intents at the same time? Elder Duanmu was so angry that he was amused. This is simply wishful thinking. Speed and slowness cannot be reconciled. Even if a person can master 2 or even 3 or 5 sword intents, it is impossible to master the two opposing sword intents of speed and slowness. You should give up on this idea as soon as possible and focus on studying the fast sword intent. Although Yun Chujio agreed obediently on the surface, she pursed her lips in her heart. This ignorant old man. The drifter had already mastered the two sword intents of speed and slowness, and he switched between them very casually. It seemed that the drifter had a much more thorough understanding of sword intents than old man Duanmu. However, the drifter did not know how to speak, which was very difficult to deal with. Seeing that Yun Chujio was absent-minded, Elder Duanmu knew that it would be useless even if he kept her here to train his sword. Thus, he said to her, "Since you have some idea of how to comprehend the fast sword intent, then go to the waterfall at the back of the mountain and practice your sword." Yun Chujio originally had no interest in training her sword, so she immediately skipped away. Yun Chujio found the waterfall that Elder Duanmu had mentioned. She did not expect that there were many disciples gathered near the waterfall. They were practicing their sword in the pool below the waterfall, and they were all drenched like drowned chickens. The corner of Yun Chujio's eyes twitched. Well, it seemed that old man Duanmu didn't lie to her. This was indeed a good place to comprehend the fast sword intent. A few disciples saw Yun Chujio coming over and couldn't help but whisper, "The inner sect competition is in 2 days. Is Yun Chujio planning to grasp the fast sword intent at the last minute?" Is there a need to say that? However, let's not talk about whether she can successfully comprehend it or not. Even if she does, she won't be a match for Liao Tao. She will definitely be beaten up badly by Liao Tao. Definitely. I heard that Liao Tao was so angry that he almost vomited blood because she snatched the right to go to the Eye of Sword Intent. She will definitely not let her off easily. Yun Chujio did not pay attention to these gossips. Her gaze was a little lost as she looked at the waterfall that was rushing down. Could the speed of the sword be faster than the speed of water? This answer was unintentionally affirmative. Based on the speed of the two drifter sword, it was completely possible to achieve it. However, with her current spiritual power level, it was impossible to achieve it. Could it be that she could only wait until her spiritual power level increased before she could comprehend the fast sword intent? Those disciples saw that Yun Chujio was just standing by the pool in a daze and did not jump into the waterfall to practice her sword. They even laughed out loud. This Yun Chujio probably only realized it now. According to her level of spiritual power, it's impossible for her to comprehend the fast sword intent. That's not necessarily true. Didn't she already grasp the chaotic sword intent before? Maybe she can comprehend it just by looking at the waterfall. Ha! That's right. If she can comprehend the quick sword intent just by looking at the waterfall, then my surname isn't Lu. Chapter 4083. Let spar. Yun Chujio turned a deaf ear to these jeers. On the contrary, when she heard them mention the chaotic sword intent, her heart skipped a beat. If the fast sword intent could only be comprehended when one reached an extreme speed, then if she wanted to comprehend the chaotic sword intent, wouldn't she have to reach the extreme disorder? However, that wasn't the case. Back then, when she was randomly brandishing her sword, she had sensed the order in the disorder and obtained victory in the disorder. Then she had vaguely comprehended the chaotic sword intent. As Yun Chujio thought about it, it was like opening a new door. The so-called comprehension of the sword intent was an instant of clarity. It was not really about how much she wanted to practice the sword. If the fast sword intent was not about practicing the sword to the extreme speed, then what was it? Yun Chujio suddenly had an epiphany. She thought of the most appropriate word, relative. That's right, it was relative. It was not absolutely fast. The so-called speed was not about how fast you had to use your sword, as long as you could be faster than your opponent. With her current level of spiritual power, it was naturally impossible for her to practice faster than the speed of a waterfall, but she could definitely be faster than her opponent. In order to be faster than her opponent, even if her spiritual power was lower than her opponent's, she could completely do it. That was to predict the opponent's sword moves in advance. The more Yun Chujio thought about it, the more excited she became. She was completely immersed in her own thoughts. The disciples practicing the sword in the waterfall saw Yun Chujio standing by the pool, frowning and laughing at the same time. They thought to themselves, has she lost her mind? At this moment, Yun Chujio pointed at the disciple who said that she had mastered the fast sword intent and was not surnamed Lu and said, "This senior brother who is not surnamed Lu, come out. Let's have a spar." Everyone burst into laughter when they heard Yun Chujio's words. The disciple whose surname was Liu's face turned red. "Yun Chujio, don't you know that disciples are not allowed to fight in private? You are framing me. We are not fighting. We are just sparring. It doesn't matter even if we go to the discipline hall. Don't tell me that you don't dare to have a spar with me?" Yun Chujio crossed her arms and said mockingly, "How could the disciple with the surname Lu admit defeat?" Moreover, his spiritual power level was at the 3rd level of Spirit Absent Realm. Although he couldn't be compared to Liao Tao and the others, he was still 3 levels higher than Yun Chujio. Naturally, he was confident. However, he still said, "Sparring is fine, but it's just a sword technique sparring. You can't use those messy things of yours." Yun Chujio smiled lightly and said, "Of course. Not only do I not use those things, but I also don't know how to use the sword intent of chaos. Do you dare to compete with me?" Hearing Yun Chujio's words, the disciple surnamed Lu sneered and said, "Since you want to humiliate yourself, then I will grant you your wish." After saying that, the disciple surnamed Lu came up from the pool and walked to an empty space not far from the pool. The other disciples who practiced swordsmanship also stopped practicing swordsmanship and gathered around to watch a good show. They felt that Yun Chujio was so arrogant that she did not know what was good for her. Did she really think that she could win every time with bad water? She was going to be unlucky today. The disciple surnamed Lu knew that Yun Chujio was full of evil, so he did not say anything more and directly took out his treasured sword and stabbed at Yun Chujio's throat. While Yun Chujio dodged, the treasured sword in her hand also stabbed at the vital point of the disciple surnamed Lu. Soon, more than 10 moves had passed, but the two of them did not have a winner. The onlookers were somewhat impressed by Yun Chujio. Although Yun Chujio's spiritual power was low, her movement was fast enough. However, her spiritual power was low, and she would fall into a disadvantage sooner or later unless she used the sword intent of chaos. However, she had already said before that she would not use the sword intent of chaos, so she would definitely lose. Chapter 4084. She had comprehended the fast sword intent. The disciple surnamed Lu had a smug look on his face. Although this Yun Chujio was stronger than he had imagined, it had only been 10 moves. He had enough confidence to defeat her. Thinking of this, the disciple surnamed Lu tightened the sword technique in his hand and abruptly increased his offense. Yun Chujio's eyes deepened. If she had used the sword technique she had learned from the cliff, she would have been able to defeat her opponent. However, she wanted to try out the idea of the fast sword intent that she had comprehended previously. She had a premonition that she was only a layer away from comprehending the fast sword intent. During the process of exchanging blows, she might be able to break through this layer of shackles. Hence, Yun Chujio's sword moves also began to accelerate. To be exact, every time she attacked, it was just a coincidence that she was slightly faster than the disciple with the surname Lu. However, it was this slight difference that caused the disciple with the surname Lu to instantly fall into a disadvantageous position. He was extremely vexed. Why did Yun Chujio, who was on the opposite side, use a sword move that he had already deciphered before he had even used his sword move? Could it be that she knew how to predict it? Those disciples who were watching the show had also seen through the trick and were shocked. Normally, the two of them would fight according to their moves. How could Yun Chujio have prepared a deciphering move in advance like this? This Yun Chujio was really strange. How did she determine the opponent's sword move? Yun Chujio naturally could not calculate. However, she had already learned the sword technique on the cliff. The 7 stars sword technique used by the disciple surnamed Lu was simply too simple for her. As long as she put in a little effort, she would be able to guess his next sword move. This fellow felt that even if he could not comprehend the fast sword intent, it was not bad to have such a harvest. It seemed that no matter what he did, he had to use his brain. Perhaps it was because he had relaxed his state of mind, but this fellow's sword technique was even faster and as swift as the wind. He did not even need to specially think about the other party's next move. He could already use the method to break it before the other party made his move. Yun Chujio felt that this was too interesting. As a result, this fellow had completely forgotten about this sparring match. He had also forgotten about the disciple with the surname Lu. He had even forgotten about the other disciples around him. His entire body and mind were immersed in a mysterious state. She was happy, but it was hard on that disciple with the surname Lu. In the beginning, he was annoyed that Yun Chujio could always guess his next move. However, he did not even have the time to be annoyed because Yun Chujio's swordsmanship had suddenly become faster. Moreover, there was a substantial sword intent around him. He was forced to retreat repeatedly and was so angry that he cursed, "Yun Chujio, you said that you wouldn't use the sword intent of chaos. Why didn't you keep your word?" However, Yun Chujio was immersed in a mysterious feeling, so she naturally couldn't hear his shout. Moreover, the sword was even faster than the wind as it stabbed towards the disciple named Lu. The disciple with the surname Lu was forced into a corner. He could only jump into the pool to escape from Yun Chujio's attack. Although Yun Chujio was in a mysterious state, she was instinctively alert to danger. Therefore, when she reached the pool, she did not continue to chase after her. Instead, she began to practice her sword. The disciple with the surname Lu gritted his teeth and cursed in the pool. It was nothing more than saying that Yun Chujio did not keep her word. Finally, a disciple who was watching the show said, "Junior brother Lu, stop shouting. I don't think Yun Chujio used the sword intent of chaos at all. It looks like the fast sword intent." "Yeah, I've seen someone use the fast sword intent before. Although it doesn't seem to be the same as what Yun Chujio used, it's not far from the truth. I didn't expect her to comprehend the fast sword intent after standing by the waterfall for a while. It's so infuriating." Chapter 4085, You Are Catching Fish? The disciple surnamed Lu could not help but be dumbstruck as he listened to the discussions of the crowd. He raised his head to look at Yun Chujio, who was practicing her sword. There was already a sword intent that seemed to be corporeal around her body, and the speed at which she was practicing her sword was getting faster and faster. He could only see the afterimages. Could it be that she had really comprehended the fast sword intent? The disciple surnamed Lu recalled what he had once said. If Yun Chujio had comprehended the fast sword intent, his surname would not be Lu. He immediately wished that he could find a hole to hide in. He was afraid that Yun Chujio would ridicule him after she woke up. He could not care about anything else and immediately climbed out of the pool, wanting to escape. However, just as he climbed ashore, Yun Chujio's sword arrived. It almost scared him to death. He quickly jumped back into the pool. "Yun Chujio, are you crazy? We agreed to spar. Are you trying to kill me?" The disciple with the surname Lu shouted in anger. However, Yun Chujio did not react at all and continued to practice her sword. The disciple thought that Yun Chujio would not attack him anymore, so he climbed up again and was scared back into the water. The disciple was so angry that he almost died. This Yun Chujio was doing it on purpose. A disciple who was watching the show said, "She may not want to kill you, but she has fallen into a mysterious state. Her remaining consciousness is still competing with you, so when she saw you appear, she naturally wanted to compete with you." Although the disciple with the surname Lu was so angry that he was twitching, he could only accept this explanation. However, the sky was about to turn dark. If this damn Yun Chujio did not wake up, would he have to stay in the water? If he stayed in the water until the next morning, he would turn into a seaweed. Fortunately, after 4 hours, Yun Chujio woke up. She looked at the sky and then looked at the disciple with the surname Lu who was gnashing his teeth in the pool. She said in puzzlement, Senior brother Lu, aren't we competing with swords? Why did you jump into the water? To catch fish? The disciple named Lu was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Catch fish? He was almost soaked into a fish. A disciple beside her asked tentatively, Junior Sister Yun, have you comprehended the fast sword intent? Yun Chujio nodded. Yes, it's all thanks to your advice. Thank you very much. See you later. Yun Chujio left happily. Those disciples looked at each other. It was all thanks to their advice. How did they give her advice? If they had the ability, they would have comprehended the fast sword intent long ago. Damn it, this person could not be compared to others. They had been practicing their swordplay here day and night without any gains. That pervert had comprehended the fast sword intent after staying here for a while. It was really unreasonable. However, when they saw the disciple surnamed Lu who had just crawled out of the water, they felt that they were at least a little stronger than him. This person was really unlucky. On the other side, Yun Chujio's heart was filled with joy. Although she had yet to make any progress with the slow sword intent, it was still not bad for her to have mastered the fast sword intent. This incident had reminded her of one thing. She could not always stay in the courtyard behind closed doors. If she were to come out and interact with people more often, she might gain additional benefits. The disciples of the Nameless Sword sect would not have thought that just because this fellow had such an idea, they would be unlucky in the future. This fellow soon arrived at his own courtyard. After pushing open the courtyard door, the drifters swarmed over as usual. It was rare for Yun Chujio to smile at them like a spring breeze. Little babies, your performance today was not bad. In the future, if you have nothing to do, practice your swordsmanship. I'll get you some more fun things. Although the two groups of drifters did not know what Yun Chujio meant by fun things, they still floated around Yun Chujio cheerfully. Chapter 4086. Was it because the road was uneven? The next day, Yun Chujio woke up early in the morning and began to fiddle around in the yard. This guy thought that since these drifters liked swings, they would definitely like seesaws and slides. Therefore, he spent nearly 2 days to make a few seesaws and a big slide. However, before the drifters could play, this guy had already played with Buttface dozens of times. Buttface was full of praise. Little fairy, you are so talented. I, Buttface, have never admired anyone, but I am full of admiration for you. I love you so much that I can't extricate myself. Yun Chujio couldn't be bothered with him. Just when she was having fun, the drifters slipped into the house. Yun Chujio knew that someone was coming. She didn't need to look to know that it must be Li Zhuangji and the others. Sure enough, after a while, they heard the voices of Li Zhuangji and the others. After Yun Chujio opened the courtyard door, Li Zhuangji and the others walked into the courtyard. However, when they saw the seesaw and slide in the courtyard, they were dumbfounded. Junior Sister Yun, you said yesterday that you had something important to do. Could it be that you're building these things? Zhao Hui asked with a stiff expression. Yun Chujio nodded proudly. That's right. How do you think I'm doing? Let me tell you, I'm a good carpenter who has been delayed by cultivation. The corners of everyone's eyes twitched. Junior Sister Yun, you better watch out. Tomorrow is the day of the inner sect competition. You actually have the time to build these things. Aren't you a little too ambitious? After an awkward silence, Zhao Hui asked, Junior Sister Yun, I heard that you have comprehended the fast sword intent? Although you have already comprehended 2 sword intents, you are still not Liao Tao's match. Are you really confident of winning? Why don't you admit defeat just like us? Yun Chujio smiled lightly and said, Of course I'm confident. You guys just follow my instructions. If you win this time, I won't withhold the money and keep it for your wives to use. Zhao Hui and the others, however, seeing that she was so relaxed, they couldn't say anything more. They chatted for a while and then left. However, just as they left the house, they fell like dogs gnawing on mud. It was a crisp fall. Li Zhuangji muttered, "It's really strange. How come when I come to junior sister Yun's place, my legs don't listen to me? I've fallen so many times." Yeah, could it be that the road is uneven? It looks quite flat too. It's really strange. Yun Chujio, who was in the courtyard, heard their muttering and the corner of her mouth twitched. It wasn't the road that was uneven, it was all the work of the drifters. They simply felt that Li Zhuangji and the others had disturbed them from playing with their new toys. This was their revenge. However, this reminded her. Therefore, after Li Zhuangji and the others had gone far away, Yun Chujio waved at the two groups of drifters who were having a great time. After saying a few words, those drifters immediately jumped up and seemed to be gloating. The next day, the monthly inner sect competition began. Everyone was waiting for a big show. It was the battle of revenge between Liao Tao and the others. After Li Zhuangji and the other three entered the arena, they directly admitted defeat. Although it was a little embarrassing, everyone was not surprised. In any case, they would lose even if they fought, so they might as well just admit defeat. At the very least, they would not get hurt. Could it be that this big show of revenge was over just like that? At this moment, Liao Tao entered the arena. His opponent was naturally Yun Chujio. Everyone shook their heads. They reckoned that Yun Chujio would also admit defeat voluntarily. It was really boring. Chapter 4087 was lacking such a disciple. Just as everyone was guessing, the bet in the southeast corner of the square exploded. There was no other reason. Not only did Zhao Hui help Yun Chujio bet 5 million upper-grade spirit stones, but each of them also bet 1 million upper-grade spirit stones on Yun Chujio's win. After everyone was stunned, two thoughts suddenly appeared in their minds. One was that it seemed that Yun Chujio would not admit defeat. She was going to fight to the death with Liao Tao. The second thought was, the opportunity to make a fortune has come. Therefore, the gambling game was extremely popular. In order to let everyone finish betting, the manager in charge of the gambling game specially informed Manager Gao, who was in charge of the competition, to delay the start of the competition. Manager Gao was naturally happy to do a favor by following the flow. He secretly shook his head. The last time he saw Yun Chujio, she was quite smart. Why was she so unwise this time? It would have been fine if she had just admitted defeat, but she still insisted on fighting. It would have been fine if she had fought, but she had actually thrown so many spirit stones. Wasn't this digging a hole for herself? Just as Manager Gao was thinking, he saw Elder Duanmu and Elder Dongfang coming over. The two of them were still worried, so they came over to take a look. If Liao Tao wanted to kill her, at least they could save Yun Chujio's life. Yun Chujio saw that her two strong supporters had come. She jumped over to brush her face for a while, and then she walked in front of the arrogant Liao Tao. "Senior brother Liao, I advise you to admit defeat now. Otherwise, if you lose to me again, how will you face others?" Yun Chujio said with a smile. Liao Tao hated her to death. He gnashed his teeth and said, "Yun Chujio, I won't talk nonsense with you. When the competition begins, I will make you regret it." Yun Chujio shrugged her shoulders. She was a very kind person. She had already advised him so sincerely. Since he still didn't give up, then it wasn't her fault. This guy narrowed his eyes and glanced at the two drifters who were hiding in the corner of the competition stage. His heart was filled with joy. With the help of the drifters, it would be a piece of cake to deal with this Liao Tao. It was a pity. For some reason, after these drifters left the Eye of Sword Intent and the Nameless Sword Sect, they could only hide in the puppet plate. Otherwise, who would dare to provoke her? They wouldn't die. After a while, the bet was over, and Manager Gao rang the copper bell that signified the start of the competition. Liao Tao didn't say anything and directly raised his sword to stab. Yun Chujio didn't directly let the two drifters attack. After all, Elder Duanmu and Elder Dongfang were watching from not far away. She had to let Liao Tao lose without leaving a trace. Moreover, this fellow also wanted to test the power of the swift sword intent that she had mastered and the chaotic sword intent. Hence, she focused her attention on fighting with Liao Tao. Elder Duanmu had just heard that Yun Chujio had comprehended the swift sword intent. He was very gratified. This little girl's comprehension was not bad. She had actually comprehended the swift sword intent. However, even if she had comprehended 2 types of sword intent, she would still not be a match for Liao Tao. She would definitely lose, but only for a short period of time. Elder Dongfang's thoughts were similar to Elder Duanmus. He said in a low voice, "Although this little girl is definitely going to lose this competition, I have to say that this little girl's rate of improvement is really astonishing. Although her spiritual power is a little low now, this is not a problem. She will definitely become a great disciple in the future. This old man is lacking such a disciple." Hearing Elder Dongfang's words, Elder Duanmu became a little wary. This old man wasn't thinking of taking the little girl as his successor disciple, was he? No, he had to strike first and find an opportunity to settle this matter first so that this old man wouldn't snatch it away. Chapter 4088. The Power of the Drifter. Just as Elder Duanmu was thinking about this, he heard the exclamations of the crowd. He looked up and saw that Yun Chujio had been forced to the edge of the competition stage by Liao Tao. Was she going to lose? Liao Tao's face revealed a vicious expression as he raised his sword and stabbed towards Yun Chujio's heart. The humiliation that this wretched girl had brought to him was finally going to be washed away. Even if this strike did not take her life, it would still cause her serious injuries. Elder Duanmu and Elder Dongfang both stood up. Just as they were about to attack, they saw Yun Chujio activate her swift sword intent. A layer of sword intent appeared in front of her body and blocked Liao Tao's treasured sword. Elder Duanmu shook his head. If it was an ordinary attack, she would have no problem blocking it with her sword intent. However, Liao Tao had also used his swift sword intent in this move. With the two counteracting each other, she was still unable to dodge this move. Elder Duanmu raised his hand and was about to push Liao Tao back when he was surprised to find that Yun Chujio had another layer of sword intent in front of her. It was the chaotic sword intent. How is this possible? Although there were many people who could comprehend more than 2 types of sword intent, he had never heard of anyone who could use 2 types of sword intent at the same time and superimpose their effects. Was he seeing things? Elder Duanmu wasn't the only one. Elder Dongfang, who was beside him, was also dumbfounded. He even pinched Elder Duanmu fiercely. Elder Duanmu grimaced in pain and said exasperatedly, "Why did you pinch me?" Elder Dongfang laughed dryly. I'm sorry. I wanted to pinch myself, but I accidentally pinched the wrong one." Elder Duanmu, however, he did not have the time to compete with Elder Dongfang right now. He stared intently at the situation on the stage. Liao Tao was obviously very surprised as well. His sword was forcefully blocked by Yun Chujio's dual sword intent. Yun Chujio took advantage of the time when he was in a daze to leap out of his attack range. This fellow was also very confused. She was totally in a hurry just now. She had already thought it through. If the 2 sword intents could not be stacked together, she would not have the time to use Xiao Hanyo. She could only let the little black bird curse. She did not expect that the sword intents could really be stacked together. Did she discover something amazing? Just when this guy was feeling pleased with himself, he never thought that the 2 wisps of Xiao Hanyo would hate Liao Tao because of what had happened just now. They did not wait for Yun Chujio to make an attack gesture and directly floated in front of Liao Tao. However, Liao Tao was just about to attack Yun Chujio, so he was in deep trouble. Liao Tao's entire body lay firmly on the stage, and the treasured sword in his hand directly flew off the stage. Everyone was shocked by this unexpected turn of events. Oh my, is this Liao Tao intimidated by Yun Chujio's sword intent just now? Why is he even prostrating himself? Forget it, if he did it on purpose, would he lose the sword in his hand? He must have been scared, so his steps were unsteady and he fell. TSK. Although Yun Chujio's sword intent is quite abnormal, isn't Liao Tao too timid? He was so scared that his legs went soft. Liao Tao almost vomited blood when he heard the crowd's discussion. He also wanted to know what the hell was going on. How did he fall down all of a sudden? However, he reacted very quickly. He was afraid that Yun Chujio would use this opportunity to attack him, so he immediately rolled on the ground and left Yun Chujio's attack range. However, when he was about to jump up, he fell heavily onto the ground. Moreover, because he used too much strength, his front teeth were knocked off. Chapter 4089 did not make a loss. Liao Tao stared blankly at the two front teeth that had left him on the ground. He was completely dumbfounded. Who was he? Where was he? What was he doing? He was only at the 5th level of Spirit Absent Realm, but he had actually fallen down twice in a row. This was simply making people laugh their heads off. Not far away, although Yun Chujio was somewhat dumbfounded by the two wisps of Drifter's performance, it was fortunate that she reacted very quickly. Just as Liao Tao was staring at the front teeth in a daze, she leaped over and kicked him under the competition stage. After a moment of silence, everyone exploded. Oh my, the competition is over? Liao Tao is too useless, right? He was actually scared to such an extent by Yun Chujio's stacked sword intent? TSK, no wonder he lost so miserably in the last competition. He is too timid. Exactly, if he was not scared out of his wits, he would not have fallen twice in a row. His legs are so scared that they are weak. Although Liao Tao really wanted to faint, other than his front teeth being broken, he didn't suffer any injuries. He couldn't faint even if he wanted to. Yun Chujio glared at the two drifters who were already hiding in the corner. She first confirmed the results of the competition, then walked in front of Elder Duanmu and Elder Dongfang. Elder Dongfang's eyes were filled with praise. Little girl, how did you manage to stack the sword intent? Yun Chujio gave a brief explanation before saying, at that time, I tried to release two sword intents consecutively in a moment of desperation. I didn't expect that it could really stack. This was also a coincidence. When Elder Dongfang and Elder Duanmu heard this, they tried to release the sword intent according to Yun Chujio's method. However, they were unable to stack the two sword intents. The two old men could not help but sigh. Could it be that this little girl was the only one who could superimpose the sword intents? The two of them did not stay any longer. After giving Yun Chujio a few more instructions, they left. Yun Chujio also left the competition stage happily. After taking a few steps, Liao Tao stood in front of her with a ferocious look on his face. Yun Chujio, just you wait. However, due to the broken front teeth, Liao Tao's pronunciation of these words was a little strange. Not only did it not have a threatening effect, but it also attracted the laughter of the surrounding crowd. Liao Tao was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He glared at Yun Chujio for a few times before he was persuaded to leave by a few disciples he was on good terms with. However, Zhao Hui, Li Zhuangji, and the others were extremely excited. They had struck it rich. They escorted Yun Chujio to the gambling house to collect a large amount of spirit stones. Then, they went to the cafeteria to have a big meal before they separated. When Yun Chujio returned to the courtyard, the two wisps of drifters behind her also floated in with a smug look. They felt that they were awesome. Unexpectedly, Yun Chujio pointed at them and said fiercely, "Who asked you to make the decision on your own accord?" Putting aside the fact that it would affect me, Elder Dongfang and Elder Duanmu were sitting at one side of the competition stage. They were so close to each other, and the two of you were acting like demons. Weren't you afraid of being discovered? Are you fearless or are you brainless? You two idiots. Fuck off. The two wisps of Piaotu suddenly did not show off before, Piaotu to the corner, the rest of the Piaotu is a look of schadenfreude. Yun Chujio ignored them and went straight into the house. Xiao Hanio of Spirit Beast Bag inside incomprehension asks, Master, don't you hate those Piao very much? How do you still fear them to be discovered? If they are discovered, I'm afraid I won't be able to get away with it either. Moreover, these Xiao Hanio tortured me so miserably before. Now that I finally have some use for them, if anything happens to them, I lose my life. I won't do such a loss-making business. Yun Chujio said faintly. Chapter 4090, Gather at the Upper House Square in the next few days. The news of Yun Chujio comprehending the superposition of sword intent spread throughout the nameless sword sect. The disciples who had already comprehended 2 types of sword intent in the sect tried to attempt the superposition of sword intent, but all of them failed. Everyone had to admit that not everyone could do the superposition of sword intent. Now, it seemed that only Yun Chujio, that pervert, could do it. However, Hei Shinjio was not very happy because she still had not successfully infused her sword intent. Could it be that she really did not have the talent to forge swords? Elder Duanmu had originally wanted to take Hei Shinjio in as a successor disciple before Elder Dongfang, but now that she was still unable to infuse her sword intent, he could not help but hesitate. No matter how talented Yun Chujio was, he was a sword forger. If he could not infuse his sword intent into a successor disciple, what kind of disciple was she? Therefore, he decided to put this matter aside for the time being and observe it again. Yun Chujio tried infusing her sword intent for a few days but failed. Hence, she did not go to Elder Duanmu's place and instead stayed in the courtyard to practice her sword with the shadow of the drifter. Of course, Hei Shinjio was tortured miserably. It was simply too horrible to look at. It was extremely tragic. Fortunately, Hei Xinjia's character was tenacious. If it was an ordinary person, they would have been tortured to a point where they had no hope of living. On this day, just as Yun Chujio was being tortured by the drifter, a message was transmitted from her identity jade token, telling her to gather at the upper house's square. Yun Chujio could not help but feel very puzzled. She was now an inner sect disciple. Even if there was anything to gather, she would only go to the middle house's square. Why was it that she was going to the upper house's square this time? When Yun Chujio arrived at the square of the upper court, she realized that everyone present was an elder and a true disciple. Yun Chujio was even more puzzled. What was he going to do? Just as she was feeling suspicious, Zhuang Hong walked over and berated, "Yun Chujio, what are you doing here? Don't you know that the lowest qualification to attend the whale feast this time is to be a true disciple? Hurry up and leave." Yun Chujio felt that this Zhuang Hong was like a mad dog. Whenever he saw her, he would bark a few times. Sooner or later, he would teach him a good lesson. Yun Chujio took out her identity jade token and waved it. "I didn't come here by myself. It was the miscellaneous affairs hall that informed me to come." Zhuang Hong sneered. "You really have a habit of lying. How could the miscellaneous affairs hall make such a mistake? You must be trying to cause trouble, so you lied and said that you received the news. I'm warning you, leave immediately. Otherwise, you'll get the discipline hall to chase you away." Yun Chujio was not a good-tempered person to begin with. Zhuang Hong kept finding fault with her again and again, and this fellow was instantly enraged. "Martial Uncle Zhuang, I respect you as an elder, so I've tolerated you many times. Don't give me face and don't be shameless. Let's not talk about the fact that I did receive the notice. Even if I did not receive the notice, it seems that maintaining order is not your responsibility, right? Could it be that you want to experience the power of the sect leader in advance? TSK, I really can't wait." Zhuang Hong's face suddenly flushed red. Yun Chujio's subtext was clearly saying that he could not wait to take over as the sect leader and wanted to replace him. These words were really too harsh. If this were to reach Master Ouyang's ears, although he couldn't do anything about it, he would definitely be unhappy. "You're spouting nonsense. Today, I must teach you a good lesson for being disrespectful to your elders." Zhuang Hong flew into a rage out of humiliation and reached out to draw his sword. Chapter 4091 headed to the Flying Flower Island at this moment. A stern shout was heard, "Stop!" Zhuang Hong was about to pull out his sword when he suddenly stopped. He turned around and saw that it was Master Ouyang who had spoken. Zhuang Hong did not know why, but he felt a little flustered. He hurriedly explained, "Master, only true disciples have the right to participate in the whale feast. Yun Chujio is purely here to cause trouble. I tried to persuade her to leave, but she contradicted me. That's why all right, there's no need to say any more. I was the one who asked the Miscellaneous Affairs Hall to inform her. This time, I'll make an exception and bring her to the whale feast." Master Ouyang interrupted Zhuang Hong's words, and his expression was a little unhappy. Recently, Zhuang Hong's performance had made him more and more dissatisfied. He was even worse than Zhang Li, who had been demoted. Although Zhang Li was a little blunt, at least he had a sense of propriety when doing things. This Zhuang Hong was getting more and more arrogant. Zhuang Hong had wanted to ask why he had brought an inner sect disciple, Yun Chujio, to the whale feast. However, seeing Master Ouyang's unfriendly expression, he did not dare to ask. Master Ouyang said to Yun Chujio, "Island Master Qi of the Flying Flower Island has taken into consideration that you were once the southern continent's female emperor of Zephyr, and has specially given you an invitation. I cannot refuse, so you will go to the whale feast with us." Yun Chujio never thought that this was the reason. However, it was good to go out for a walk. There were so many people, so she wasn't afraid of causing any trouble. Thus, this fellow agreed with a smile. Master Ouyang nodded and continued to walk towards the square. Zhuang Hong glared at Yun Chujio and quickly followed. Yun Chujio pursed her lips. He was a fool who didn't know his own limits. Even if she didn't make a move, old man Ouyang would probably take care of him. The moment he thought that he could go out for a walk, he immediately threw this unhappiness to the back of his mind. After a while, Master Ouyang began to speak. He only mentioned some things to take note of during the whale feast and informed everyone that they would be leaving in 2 days. After Yun Chujio returned to the courtyard happily, she said to the drifters, "I'm going to the Flying Flower Island to attend the whale feast in 2 days. Do you guys want to stay in the sect or follow me out for a stroll?" The two groups of drifters were obviously not well behaved. They immediately scrambled to jump up, indicating that they were willing to go with Yun Chujio. Yun Chujio had long expected this. She was willing to bring these drifters along. Perhaps it would be helpful to her. On the morning of their departure, the drifters obediently entered the 3 puppet discs. Yun Chujio kept them and went to the meeting place. She looked around. Since this was a gathering of the 6 sects, Master Ouyang naturally had to personally lead the team. However, he was afraid that Elder One would be restless in the sect, so Elder One also went with them. Elder One was not an ordinary person. He was afraid that Master Ouyang would have some tricks up his sleeve, so he left one Qingba in the sect. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Master Ouyang immediately summoned his flying spirit tool and everyone set off. The journey was very smooth. A few days later, everyone arrived at the Sea of All Things where the Flying Flower Island was located. As soon as they arrived at the seaside, the disciples of the Flying Flower Island came to welcome them and led them to a luxurious ship. On the ship, there were maids and servants. They prepared tea and spirit fruits for everyone, making them feel at home. Not only that, there were also sharp-tongued disciples on the deck who helped everyone introduce the situation of the Sea of All Things and the Flying Flower Island. Their attitude was very appropriate. Yun Chujio thought to herself that the Flying Flower Island was well-versed in the way of treating guests, making people very comfortable. Chapter 4092 Water. Well, the Flying Flower Island was very far from the shore. The ship sailed for a full 2 days before they finally saw a densely packed island in the distance. The Flying Flower Island didn't just refer to an island. Such a large area, or even half of the Sea of All Creation, was within the territory of the Flying Flower Island. The reason why it was said that half of the Sea of All Creation was because the Sea of All Creation was bounded by a trench. South of the trench was the territory of the Flying Flower Island, while north of the trench lived high-level sea beasts. The people of the Flying Flower Island didn't dare to set foot in it. The blue-tailed giant bone whale they captured this time was a high-level sea beast that had accidentally entered the shallow sea. It was very rare to see it, and they had to work together to subdue it. Otherwise, they would not have used it as a publicity stunt. The big ship did not sail to the main island. Instead, it docked at the side of an island not far from the main island. Before the big ship docked, there were already people waiting on the dock. "Master Ouyang, elders, my island master originally wanted to come over personally to welcome you, but he still had to prepare for the whale feast. I'm really sorry. Everyone, please follow me to Hibiscus Island to rest for the time being. This way please." Elder Jia, who was in charge of receiving them, said warmly. The people from the Nameless Sword sect were not dissatisfied with this. Although Island Master Qi did not come over personally to welcome them, he still sent Elder Jia, who had a rather high status on the island, to welcome them. This could be considered as giving the Nameless Sword sect enough face. Yun Chujio walked at the back of the group and looked around. She had already heard from the disciples of the Flying Flower Island that the islands of the Flying Flower Island were basically named after flowers. Hibiscus Island was considered one of the larger islands among the many islands. Hibiscus flowers could be seen everywhere on the island. It was a lively scene. The Flying Flower Island had obviously put in a lot of effort for this whale feast. Not only had they specially chosen 5 islands to be the temporary residences of the 5 great sects, but they had also built an exquisite guest house. Moreover, there were maids and servants in the guest house. Elder Jia exchanged a few more pleasantries with Master Ouyang before taking his leave. The journey was tiring as everyone went to the guest house that was allocated to them to wash up and rest. Yun Chujio followed a maid to the guest house that was allocated to her. Although the courtyard wasn't big, it was very clean and tidy. Yun Chujio was somewhat surprised. She thought that little bitch Xiao Yu would take the opportunity to frame her, but she didn't expect that she would worry too much. Even so, after the maid left, Yun Chujio still checked inside and out before her gaze finally landed on a well. Yun Chujio carefully walked to the edge of the well and looked down. There was indeed water inside. If she was not more observant than others, she might not have suspected anything. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. She thought that Xiao Yu, that little bitch, had turned over a new leaf, but she did not expect that she was still the same person. The appearance of this well in her courtyard was clearly abnormal. One had to know what was the most scarce thing on the island. Without a doubt, it was fresh water. Such a scarce well naturally had to be set at a place where it was convenient for everyone to fetch water. It was not an exaggeration to even send people to guard it, but now it had appeared in her guest courtyard so casually. It was simply too abnormal, all right? Yun Chujio narrowed her eyes. Should she move to another courtyard? This fellow rolled his eyes and suddenly thought of a way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. After a simple wash and rinse, she strolled to the small training field set up in the guest courtyard. It had to be said that the Flying Flower Island was very considerate. Not only was there a living room in the guest courtyard for discussion, there was also a small training field set up. Chapter 4093 Octopus had taken the bait when Yun Chujio arrived at the training field. Many of the successive disciples were practicing their sword techniques. After all, the ultimate goal of the whale feast was to compete with these successive disciples. A few successive disciples were surrounding Zhuang Hong and practicing their sword techniques, looking as if they were trying to curry favor with him. Half of the successive disciples of the Nameless Sword sect were old disciples of the same generation as Zhuang Hong, and the other half were new disciples of the same generation as Yun Chujio. Whether it was in terms of seniority or spiritual power, the old disciples naturally had the advantage and were firmly ahead of the new disciples. Therefore, although they were all successive disciples, their statuses were different. Zhuang Hong was an old disciple, and moreover, he was the sect master's successive disciple. Naturally, many people would curry favor with him. Zhuang Hong's gaze swept over Yun Chujio, and his expression immediately became unsightly. In order to curry favor with him, the disciples next to him. He mocked. Some people are really lucky. They are clearly not true disciples, but they still came to participate in the whale feast. They only need to eat and drink. Anyway, they are not true disciples, so they don't need to participate in the competition. They are really idiots. Right, you are right, she is an idiot. When Yun Chujio heard these people, she immediately rushed in front of them angrily. Who are you talking about? All of you shut up. Otherwise, I will go to the sect leader and complain. I will kill all of you. How could those disciples be afraid of Yun Chujio's threat? They all winked and said, Yun Chujio, if you have the ability, then go and complain. We don't believe that the sect leader will punish us for such a small matter. You should cherish your idiotic quota. Otherwise, with your talent, you won't have the chance to participate in such a grand event in your lifetime. Yun Chujio's small face flushed red. She was obviously furious. However, she immediately said proudly, "Humph. So what if my quota is a gift? Let me tell you, I still have a well in my courtyard. What is the most lacking thing on Hibiscus Island? Fresh water. You will soon be unable to wash properly because of the lack of fresh water, but am not afraid. After all, the well is in my courtyard. What does this mean? It means that the people of the Flying Flower Island also look at me in a different light. So what if some of them are the disciples of the sect leader? Is there a well in your courtyard?" Yun Chujio looked at Zhuang Hong provocatively after she finished speaking. She looked as arrogant as she could be. When those disciples heard Yun Chujio's words, they were stunned at first, then they became indignant. "Yun Chujio, if you know your place, then give up the courtyard. How can you have the right to live in such a good courtyard? That's right, you don't deserve to live in such a good courtyard. Among us, only Martial Uncle Zhuang has the right to live in a courtyard with a well. Hurry up and give the courtyard to Martial Uncle Zhuang. Yun Chujio, if you know your place, then forget it. Otherwise, don't blame us for forcefully kicking you out." Yun Chujio's face was filled with anger and a little fear. You're unreasonable. That's clearly my courtyard. Why should I give it to Martial Uncle Zhuang? I won't give it up today. What can you do to me? One of the disciples curled his lips and said to Zhuang Hong, "Martial Uncle Zhuang, let's go to her courtyard now. We want to see if she has the guts to fight with you for the courtyard." Although Zhuang Hong did not say anything, he followed the disciples out of the martial arts practice field. He had always thought highly of himself and naturally wanted a courtyard with a well. Yun Chujio looked at the backs of the crowd and her eyes flashed. The fish had taken the bait. Chapter 4094. Chu Fang. Although He Xinjiao was happy, she looked angry and wanted to chase after him. However, she heard someone say weakly, "Junior Sister Yun, please wait a moment." Yun Chujio turned her head and saw that the person who spoke was also a core disciple. He had a handsome face, but his body was a little thin. Yun Chujio had some impression of him. When she was in the Eye of Sword intent, she had sneaked into the seat of a core disciple. She had talked to a core disciple and asked him if he saw the fog. It was this disciple in front of her. At that time, when Zhuang Hong had made things difficult for her, he had even tugged at her clothes and reminded her not to offend Zhuang Hong. Yun Chujio had a good impression of him. When that person saw Yun Chujio looking at him, he smiled a little awkwardly. Then he lowered his voice and said, "Junior Sister Yun, it's just a guest house. We'll be leaving after staying for a while. They have the advantage in numbers. Why do you have to be so serious with them? It won't be worth it if you suffer at that time." Yun Chujio was not a fool. She naturally knew that he had good intentions, so she said with a faint smile, "Thank you for your advice, senior brother. How should I address you? Which elder is your disciple?" The disciple scratched his head embarrassedly. "My name is Chu Fang. My master is Elder Gu." Although Yun Chujio did not have much contact with Elder Gu, she felt that the old man was not bad, so her impression of Chu Fang became even better. "So, it's senior brother Chu. I'm going to rob my courtyard now. I'll come and play with you another day. See you later." Yun Chujio didn't wait for Chu Fang's reaction after she finished speaking and hopped off. Chu Fang, so what he said just now was all for naught? This junior sister Yun was too stubborn. He thought about it and decided to follow behind. Although many people in the sect said that Yun Chujio was no good, he felt that this junior sister Yun was very different from the rest. Yun Chujio realized that Chu Fang was following her, so she did not bother about him and went to her own courtyard. At this moment, Zhuang Hong and the others were sitting in the courtyard, obviously planning to occupy this courtyard. Although Yun Chujio was eager for Zhuang Hong to seize this courtyard, she had to sing the whole opera. If she gave up the courtyard to him easily, he might be suspicious. Yun Chujio stood at the door with her hands on her hips, pointing at Zhuang Hong and the others and scolding, "Shameless! Don't you feel embarrassed for taking over someone else's courtyard? Get out of here quickly, or I will really go to the sect leader and complain. Zhuang Hong snorted coldly, Yun Chujio, master is very busy right now. If you disturb him over such a small matter, you will not have a good ending. Yun Chujio clenched her fists, her eyes were red with anger. In the end, she stomped her feet. You're ruthless. We'll see about that. After Yun Chujio said that, she ran out of the courtyard amidst the laughter. Chu Feng saw Yun Chujio running out with red eyes. He hesitated for a moment, but still chased after her and asked carefully, Junior Sister Yun, are you okay? Yun Chujio silently shook her head, but her eyes were still red. Chu Feng sighed and said, Junior Sister Yun, just bear with it. Martial Uncle Zhuang has always been a true disciple. He only fears Martial Uncle Wan a little. You can't beat him. Yun Chujio's heart moved when she heard Chu Feng's words. She had originally planned to go to Zhuang Hong's courtyard, but now she had turned around and returned to the martial arts practice field. When she arrived at the martial arts practice field, Yun Chujio sat pitifully on a large rock. She did not say anything, only shedding a few tears. Chapter 4095. A little white lotus. The martial arts practice field had already gathered many successive disciples who practiced the sword. When they saw Yun Chujio's expression, they were all very curious. Some of them who knew what had happened before began to ramble on about what had happened. Everyone shook their heads. Although they were not familiar with Yun Chujio, and their impression of her was also average, Zhuang Hong, as the sect leader's disciple, had actually stolen a junior's courtyard. This was really a little too much. Yun Chujio portrayed a little white lotus in a lifelike manner. From time to time, she would sob a few times. Her small body even started to tremble. She looked like she was being bullied but did not dare to say anything. Everyone sympathized with the weak. Seeing her like this, even though they were not familiar with her, they felt a little more pity and comforted her. The general meaning was that it was just a courtyard. If he wanted to snatch it, so be it. Don't take it to heart. Yun Chujio gratefully nodded to everyone and wiped away her tears before leaving. This time, Chu Feng did not follow her. Firstly, he saw that Yun Chujio seemed to be fine. Secondly, he was not familiar with Yun Chujio. Hence, he did not see Yun Chujio walk out not far away. Her originally pitiful face revealed a trace of a smile. Yes, it was a very sinister one. She was really looking forward to that little bitch Xiao Yu and Zhuang Hong biting each other. Perhaps there would be a good show to watch tonight. When that time came, it would definitely be very interesting. Zhuang Hong's courtyard was not too far from Yun Chujio's original courtyard. Yun Chujio simply tidied it up and began to cultivate. When the sky turned dark, this fellow excitedly jumped onto the roof, munching on melon seeds as he prepared to watch a good show. This fellow was actually very curious. What exactly was that Xiao Yu planning to do? After thinking about it, it was just that someone would crawl out from the well. Could it be that she wanted to kill her? This was unlikely. After all, if she was killed in the guest courtyard, Flying Flower Island would also be implicated. Or was she planning to poison her to death? It was also unlikely. If she wanted to poison her, there was no need to go through so much trouble. He was really curious. This guy waited for a long time, but he did not hear any movement from the other side. He was so sleepy that he yawned, so he could only go back to his room to rest. While he was half asleep, he suddenly heard Zhuang Hong scream. Hei Xinjiao instantly opened her eyes. Oh my, the show has begun. This guy did not even bother to put on his shoes. He jumped onto the roof as soon as he stepped out of the door and stretched his neck to look at Zhuang Hong's courtyard. He could vaguely see that many of the courtyards were lit up by candlelight. There were also people rushing over in a hurry, and Zhuang Hong's howling could be heard in the midst of it. Although Hei Xinjiao was extremely curious, this guy did not dare to go over to watch the commotion in order to avoid suspicion. He would definitely find out the next day anyway. Zhuang Hong's howling could be heard for almost half the night. Hei Xinjiao felt that the sound was too damn beautiful, and it could be used as a lullaby. The next day, Yun Chujio woke up early, which was rare. After breakfast, she strolled to the martial arts practice field. There were many disciples gathered on the martial arts practice field, but they did not practice their swords. Instead, they were talking excitedly about what happened last night. Have you heard? Martial Uncle Zhuang was in a terrible state last night. If Elder One had not arrived in time, he would have been eaten by that monster. What monster? It's a sea beast called the iron-clawed poisonous octopus. I don't know how it crawled into the well. The well leads to the spring at the back of the mountain. Maybe the iron-clawed poisonous octopus crawled in from the spring. Not only is the iron-clawed poisonous octopus extremely strong, it's also extremely poisonous. I heard that Martial Uncle Zhuang's face was destroyed. I don't know if he'll be able to recover in the future. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.